Okay. Okay. Well, welcome to History Matters. And so does coffee. This microphone is like right in my face. And there's coffee mug. Today we're going to be talking, in a sense, I had a hard time naming this episode, but in a way, it's going to be talking about both sidesism or the fact that there kind of aren't two sides in this issue in our current political times. And I'll talk in a minute about what sparked this, and I'll go back in time to talk about it a little bit in history too. But before I do that, I turn to my partner in crime, Annie. I don't know if those are new glasses, but I love them if they are.
Thank you. They are.
I love them. Look at that. I even recognize, because you always want, when you have new glasses, you want someone to recognize
Yes, you
them.
do. You do.
So I turn to my partner in crime in snazzy glasses to explain the rules of the game.
Hi, everybody. I'm Annie Evans from New American History. It's my great delight every Friday to be here with you. The way this works is Joanne will talk about today's topic for about 30 minutes. You are free to continue the conversation in the chat. Some of you are playing bingo. We know that. But what we really need for you to do is put your questions about today's topic down below in the Q&A. I'll be back in about 30 minutes and we'll take some of your questions. See you in a little bit.
Wonderful. And if you are here for the first time, please make sure you are replying to all in chat, but let folks know in chat because this is I believe, our 209th episode. We have a pretty amazing community here at History Matters, and they will give you a robust welcome if you tell them that you are here for the first or even second time. Okay. So let's move on. I have middle ground written on the top of my notes, and it kind of is about that. I kept playing back and forth, both sides, middle ground. But let me tell you the two pieces of news this week that inspired my thinking for this episode. Okay, first, and it's actually not the one I heard about first, but when I found it, it linked with the other one. But first, and I don't know how widely known this is, but the Republican National Committee, the RNC, apparently uh, basically fired most of their employees in March. They were told that they were being let go and that they could reapply for their jobs. And in the reapplication for their jobs, they are interviewed by Trump advisors. And they are asked, do they believe that the 2020 election was stolen? Now, this is an article in the Washington Post, I think is the place where this, I don't know if it broke there, but there's an article on it that I think I posted somewhere on social media. I don't remember which platform now. Josh Dawsey, Dawsey, I believe, is the person who wrote the article. And he's the person who said that basically in recent days, Trump advisors have been quizzing applicants for RNC jobs um, who worked particularly in key states coming for 2024. What do they think about the 2020 election? One person who was interviewed said the question was open ended: was the 2020 election stolen? But he said, if you answer no, you probably don't think you're going to get a job. So that to me was shocking, right? If you want to work for the RNC, essentially, you have to buy into the big lie, right? You have to say, yes, I believe that that election was stolen. So there's the RNC basically saying, and I can't vouch for all of the interviews. All I can talk about is what I read in a variety of different places, uh, reputable media sources online, that this interviewing process has happened. Let me see what the RNC did not deny it. I think I even got a quote from the RNC person here, if I can come across it fast enough. And I'm not. Anyway, I can't find the response, but the RNC didn't deny it, but basically said, we need to know what people's experience with elections is. Okay, well, now you know. That just shocked me, right? That's a litmus test, essentially. That, do you buy into the big lie? Oh, you do. Well, then we want you here. And the problem with that, of course, is that's essentially asking people to sign on to the big lie being it wasn't a free and fair election, which over and over again it was proven it was. So you are asking people to basically swear against that they're not swearing, vouch. There's not even a vouch. sort of promise that they're standing against democracy if they want to work for the RNC. That's what it boils down to. I'll come back to that idea in a moment, but that shocked me, right? That the litmus test now to work for the RNC is you have to believe that that election wasn't real, that it wasn't legitimate. Now that obviously leads to the other story this week that caught my interest: Ronna McDaniel being hired and fired by NBC. And there are a lot of ins and outs of that I will not go into. But given that as the former head of the RNC, she pretty much peddled the big lie about the 2020 election being stolen, and even took part in a phone call in 2020 in which Trump was pressuring two Republican members of the Wayne County Board of Canvassers not to sign the certification of the election. She was on that phone call. That's a problem. She's an election denier. She's someone who's acting as though a legitimate election was not a legitimate election, and NBC hired her to be a commentator because they needed commentary from the other side, from both sides. This is going to be what I'm going to be talking about today. The New York Times said that this entire episode with McDaniel underscores the challenge to news organizations of, quote, fairly representing pro-Trump viewpoints in their coverage. Okay. Let's unpack that a little bit. Fairly representing pro-Trump viewpoints in their coverage. If those viewpoints are centered on a baseless lie, to fairly represent them means you have to air them as a lie. You can't air them as truth, right? You can't say, well, we're fairly representing both sides. These people are baselessly claiming the election was stolen. That's one side. The problem here, and I'm going to talk about that in detail this morning, is that we're not on an even playing field. We're not in the normal realm of democratic politics where there can be two sides, three sides, many sides, people disagree, and then they all commit to the same system of politics, the same government system, to sort out what happens with that disagreement. We are not in the realm right now of normal democratic politics when one party is, by definition, anti-democratic, right? If you're not really in favor of free and fair elections, if you really don't want to deal with ever losing elections, you're not following democratic rules. You are not supporting democracy. So there isn't a middle ground between I'm going to follow my own rules that don't support democracy and we're going to follow democratic rules. What is the middle ground? There isn't one. If one side said, we have our own vision of America, and the other side said, we have a different vision of America, there might not be a middle ground, but if they're playing by the same rules, our system of government would find the middle ground. But if one side says we have our own set of rules and the other side says, no, we like democracy and we like the system that allows things to be sorted out based on public opinion, there's no middle ground there. And that's what I want to talk about today. Doug, it's either Hay or High, it's Heye. In the Washington Post article that I started out by quoting, apparently he's a longtime GOP strategist. For a while, he worked as a communications director at the RNC, and I think he put it really clearly. He said, the Republican Party expects staffers to, he used the word, he didn't actually use the word, this was the Washington Post, I'll use a different word, expects them to basically spout off what a presidential candidate says and believes, right? That's why they're there, to back up that presidential candidate, to go along with their worldview. That's what the RNC does for the presidential candidate. But when you have someone like Trump making, the phrase used in the paper was outlandish claims, making claims that no other person would make that are anti-democratic, you put people in the RNC in not a very easy spot, right? It's not as though my candidate believes in some extreme measure that is democratic, but my candidate believes we should do nothing about the climate at all. You're part of the RNC, you're going to have to be supporting that in one way or another. That's different than saying my candidate has an issue with elections, my candidate denies legitimate elections. People in the RNC are essentially being asked to sign on to that big lie, and they can't do what you normally do with the RNC, which is just support the candidate, or you can, but you're doing so in your own little universe of truth that is not on a democratic playing field. Now let's look to history a little bit and see what it can tell us about this, because certainly we've had many times in American history where there have been extremes on different sides, where there has been extreme partisanship, where there hasn't seemed to be a middle ground, right? We've had a lot of times in US history that there's been extreme division, and it's felt as though there is no middle ground. I remember, I actually don't have that in my notes, but I remember in writing my last book, The Field of Blood, I believe it was Edward Everett of Massachusetts, I think, says he didn't want to go to a meeting in Massachusetts that was extreme, he thought, along with the Republicans, because he was uncomfortable being extreme at that particular moment, but he felt if he went, it said something, and if he didn't go, it meant something. And he said, I don't know what to do. There's nothing that I can do that is neutral, because even if I don't go, it says something, right? So I thought of him because he's kind of saying there's no middle ground. He's actually just saying, how do I not express a viewpoint here? There might be a middle ground. He can't find it, and it's a bind for him. But let's go to the Constitution, because that's actually really what I want to talk about here. James Madison offers, I think, a really interesting way of getting at this, is there a middle ground question, by talking to Edmund Pendleton, February 21st, 1788, about the Constitution. And he's essentially saying the question at hand, he thinks, is whether the Union, quote, shall or shall not be continued. There is, in my opinion, no middle ground to be taken. The opposition with some has disunion assuredly for its object, and with all for its real tendency. Events have demonstrated that no coalition can ever take place in favor of a new plan of government among the adversaries to the proposed one. The grounds of objection among the non-signing members of the convention are by no means the same. The disapproving members who were absent but who have since published their objections differ irreconcilably from each of them. The writers against the Constitution are as little agreed with one another, and the principles which have been disclosed by the several minorities where the Constitution has not been unanimously adopted are as heterogeneous, as can be imagined. Now, he says, and of course, what did I do this morning in preparing for this episode? I went to Founders Online and I searched a lot of things, but one of the things I searched for was middle ground. I found a lot of talk about fields and a variety of other things, but there were some people talking about an actual middle ground. And in this case, Madison says there's no middle ground in the constitutional debate. And in his mind, you're for the Union or you're against the Union. But here's the important aspect of this, because he actually says, without saying it, there could be a middle ground if the other side wasn't so disorganized and in such disagreement. They might come together and have a different plan of government. And if they did that, who knows what would happen. So although he says there's no middle ground given the current circumstances. But even in this debate where you would think, I'm for the Constitution, I'm against the Constitution, he's suggesting there could have been, we don't know, there won't be, but there could have been, but the other side will never pull it together to come up with another option. So there is a middle ground, even in something that seems as straightforward as that. Now, Hamilton comes along with a wonderful middle ground statement, but then complicates it. So let me start out with the part that you want to hear, right? Hamilton says, a government which does not rest on the basis of justice rests on that of force. He's saying this in his defense of the funding plan. So he's stepping down as Secretary of the Treasury. He's upset that there appear to be maneuvers going on in Congress to not follow along with what he thinks should be happening with the funding plan, and he's out, so he can't really affect this, but he writes a long defense of the funding plan. He says in it, a government which does not rest on the basis of justice rests on that of force. There is no middle ground. Okay. But then he goes on right after that to say, establish that a government may decline a provision for its debts, though able to make it, and you overthrow all public morality, you unhinge all the principles that must preserve the limits of free constitutions, you have anarchy, despotism, or what you please, but you have no just or regular government. Now, that's a nice rhetorical move, right? You can say that you have either justice, and without justice, you have force. And then he essentially says, well, that's kind of the same thing as Federalists and Republicans, right? You have one or the other. You have justice or the collapse of debt and force. It's a bit of a rhetorical move there, Hamilton. He was a good lawyer. But talking about the Federalists and the Republicans, high extreme partisanship. My first book is all about that partisanship. Extreme, over the top. People talked about it all the time. Jefferson says that people would cross the street rather than be on the same side of the street with someone of opposing politics, right? That's an extreme political moment. There doesn't seem to be a middle ground between the Federalists and the Republicans, except there was a way to maneuver between them. And that was our democratic political process, right? They don't agree. They can't agree. They seem really extremely different in their views. Elections, debate and compromise in Congress. These are the things that in one way or another sift opinions, and there end up being results. Now, sometimes the outcome may please one side and not the other. Sometimes an outcome might please nobody. But the fact of the matter is, democracy is the tool for finding some kind of middle ground. That is how you find middle ground. That is the point of democracy, in one way or another, sifting through opinions and ideas with a process that all have bought into and signed onto, that takes all votes into account, that has free and fair elections that deal with them, or ideally a Congress that follows rules in the same way. And there's an outcome. And because all have signed on to those rules, they abide by the outcome. And if they don't think that that election or contest has been fair, they can challenge it. And if the challenge doesn't work, they abide by the outcome. Democracy is the tool for finding some kind of middle ground, or at least for finding one's way, I need more coffee, man, out of a seemingly irreconcilable clash between opposing views. You can't both sides the struggle between Trump and the Democrats for that reason, because they're not both playing by democratic rules. They are not both agreeing to participate under a democratic system of government. You can't have two sides to something that isn't one cohesive world, right? In one cohesive world, a democratic world, you can have two sides of an issue and decide what happens. If you're not part of that one world with agreed upon rules, how do you have two sides? If one side is anti-democracy, it is not the other side from those proposing a worldview on democracy. Or if it is, if what we're saying is, or what we're seeing is, democracy versus anti-democracy, then you have to state that clearly and honestly. Here are the two sides. We have both sides. We have one side that is abiding by democratic rules. We have the other side that does not seem willing to lose elections at all, and is asking its people who are wanting to take part in organizing Republican elections, campaigns, to sign on to a lie, right? If you want to have both sides, those are the two sides. One side playing by democratic rules, one side not so much. But to say that there's a middle ground between the Trumpists and the Democrats, to say that you could both sides, this or this, that's a false effort. That can't work. So when the media is trying to both sides things, they're acting as though anti-democracy is the other side to democracy, but they're not saying so. They're covering things and acting as though everyone's playing by the same rules. And according to those rules, here's one side and here's the other side. That's not what we're living in right now. Now, does that mean that I have the answer as to what the press should do. I do not. But what I can say is pretending that, for example, we can hire Ronna McDaniel and she'll represent the other side and that will be a good thing. Well, if her other side is grounded on a lie grounded on denying a free and fair election, that's the other side of what? That's not the other side of a democratic small d contest. That's a different set of rules. You want to represent that different set of rules, okay, but do that honestly. And don't pretend that in airing that person's opinions, that somehow or other, it's the other side of a democratic contest, because it isn't. That's, I think, the important point. That's why, I sort of all week was like, wait, what? RNC people have to basically say that they believe 2020 was stolen? Like, wait, Ronna McDaniel was hired, to represent the other side, and she took part in denying the election? And then when she was asked about it, her responses were like, well, work for a team, you got to take one for the team. It's like, no, you presented and supported a lie that is by definition anti-democratic. How do you think you can come on here and be reputable as someone presenting truth in any way? We're really, it's upside down land where we are thinking that what we see right now before us are two sides of one issue. There might be two sides in an election, but there are not two sides to the question of whether we of right now in this campaign as to whether we have democracy or not. That's the question. That's two sides of democracy, not so much. That's it. That's what's in front of us right now. And that's what this week's news suggested to me. So I guess what I'm saying, I always have a takeaway when we're doing our sessions every week. And I suppose the takeaway this week is to really think about the claim that's being made when people are middle grounding or both sidesing, particularly anything. Are they talking about people operating in the same world by the same set of rules or not? Can there be two sides between Nazis and non-Nazis? Right? Are there two sides to people who have that kind of a viewpoint, who are not operating according to sort of free and fair public opinion writ large matters? Can you have a middle ground? We could argue that. I'm sure we might even argue that in Q&A. But think about both sides before accepting the idea. It sounds so free and fair. Both sides. We need both sides. And that's what a seemingly free and fair media does. But the circumstances here are different. The circumstances here, there are real questions we need to ask about the sides. Two sides of what? And what would that middle ground look like? If one side is not playing by democratic rules, how does it meet middle ground with people who are? That's what I want to do, I suppose, is highlight for you the degree to which, as appealing as we need both sides may sound, because it's democratic, small d, we have to really think about what the sides are that are being opposed to each other and whether that's a fair comparison. Okay, that is what I want to say. And I'm like 2 minutes early. I'm shocked. So thank you, Carolee, for the mug. You're gonna have to travel a little ways with me for this mug, but you'll see why. So I'm talking about, among other things, and for those who are here and haven't been here before, every week I have a mug that in some way or another connects with the topic that we're debating. It's our 209th episode. I do not have 209 mugs, but I have a lot of them. And sometimes people have to travel away to support what I'm saying here. Anyway, Clinton is here in time for the mug. So I've been talking about news coverage and how, news coverage should be not comparing lack of democracy, anti-democracy with democracy. So we're talking about fair news coverage. The newbie news is always fair.
The newbie news is always fair.
The newbie news, newbie new democracy versus non-democracy. So the newbie news was the best I could do.
It really was.
Um,
And that is a Carolee production.
It is a Carolee production. It
For
says
sure.
oodling for democracy every Friday morning. And on the other side, it says B to B to B to B, and that's the newbie news. Oodly oop peep peep peep, and that's the newbie news.
Bipartisan, fair and accurate reporting.
With feathers. So anyway, that was that. So the newbie news, they know how to present these things. That was my.
And people, Joanne was saying that they see your new newbie, felted newbie. You can maybe show a little more in the after party.
Exactly.
Somebody spotted that right away.
I put it there for that reason.
Yep. Okay, we've got some great questions. Are you ready? You want to sip a coffee first?
Bring it on.
All right. Our good and loyal buddy Dave asks, if Trump is the Republican nominee, how should news networks cover the convention in Milwaukee this summer? If there's no platform on policy, just whatever the candidate wants, how will they cover that? Just 2 minutes each night and ignore it, or not even cover it at all? Like, he's just curious when there's no platform, it's just whatever he's thinking that day and blurting out. He's just curious how they would cover it.
Well, I mean, this is an interesting question, and I'd like to hear what people have to say. My answer to that, along the lines of what I said, would be, okay, you can cover it, but then you have to say pretty darn clearly, there is no platform here. So what they are presenting here is what he says, in other words, be clear about what we're watching. There isn't, what election was it when first there was no real platform? I can't remember which one that was. And I remember watching on TV. Someone else will remember better than me. You can, someone is, I think, I can't read it, but 2020. Okay, 2020, that's logical, right? There was no platform. And people said, the media said, they have no platform. I'm not going to say don't cover the Republican convention. I guess I'm still playing by Democratic rules. But I can't see on the bottom someone saying I should open chat. Historians who can't remember dates. And now I'm like, why I yada. Anyway. But I think if you're going to show that convention, then be very clear about what it is and what it's presenting, and don't just repeat their rhetoric. I think the same could be true on the other side, right? Show the Democratic convention. If there's problematic rhetoric, if they're saying something that either doesn't seem true or seems hard to believe, then say that. But I don't think you can present the Republican, or it would be nice if people didn't present the Republican convention as just another convention, just more claims, if the people behind it are essentially not going to play by Democratic rules. That has to be clear. We have to understand that. And that's not a partisan claim. I mean, it's if you're denying the 2020 election after that has been investigated and proven to have been a legitimate election, and you're still on that wagon, that's a problem. We have ways to challenge elections and investigate them. We do. We don't deny people that chance. But when you've done it a lot of times, then the system has been the system. Okay.
So the chat, Tim said Project 2025 is their new platform.
Well, okay. I just saw that and I was like, yes, you're correct. Okay, then talk about what is in Project 2025.
Yeah.
Not like, just honestly, here is what it says, and that is their platform. I think I believe that it will surprise and shock many people. So that's one way. This is what they're saying they want to do. Here is where they've said they want to do it, right? We want evidence. And here is the it that they're supposedly planning. Okay.
All right. Mona has an interesting question. She says she wants to know, are there any Republican voices, Joanne, that you think still work for democracy? Is there a path in history for how a new Republican or a third party could become the viable option to relegate the MAGA as a distasteful footnote. Why are we so wed to a party that most of us agree is now an imposter of its former self?
Well, I don't believe right now that there is really a Republican Party, or if there is, it's just MAGA. And the people who aren't MAGA folk are backing away, are retiring, or stepping out of Congress, or deciding not to run, or staying silent and stepping away from politics. Right now, the Republican Party is MAGA. And that's not really a party because it doesn't really have policies in a normal democratic kind of way. It's what, as someone said at the outset, it's what Trump thinks is what the policy is, although Project 25 is its own scary thing. It's not, well, it's operating as a party, but not a democratic one. Let's put it that way. And now I've lost the question. What was the question?
She was wondering if you think that there is a path forward for the party or
personally, I think that there needs to be a new party, or the Republican Party as it exists now needs to like eliminate the MAGA portion, because the MAGA portion is not operating according to democratic politics. That's not what they want to do. So in that way, how can they be a party in a democratic system of government? So there could be a Republican Party. There should be, right? I mean, there should be not just one party, but more than one. There should be people with different views able to compete and contest and debate and clash in elections and have different views of the future and argue and campaign over those different views. That's democracy. So there should be, and we can call it a conservative party. There should be another party that doesn't agree with the Democrats. That should be there, but they have to be a party that wants to abide by the normal rules of democratic governance. And right now, that's not MAGA. And whether MAGA somehow vanishes, I think it's more likely that there'll be just another party, and maybe with another name. I don't know, but there needs to be a party, but it has to be in that same cohesive realm as the Democratic Party, willing to play by small d democratic rules. So, you know, we're in it, as speaking as a political historian with my political historian brain, you know, throughout the 19th century, there are parties coming and going. We talked about this at some point in recent weeks, right? Parties come, parties go, a new party comes, it merges with another. It's not as though there's been a simple state of two parties forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. It's been, parties have been in flux. We are used to the two parties that have been in existence for our lifetimes, but it doesn't mean it's going to stay that way forever. And we might be, you know, at an inflection point here. I don't know, but it seems kind of likely to me.
The chat is lit up. Okay.
I'm like watching the chat just go streaming by.
There's a little stream about which, you know, Republicans in history, would they still be members of the Democratic Party? Excuse me, would they still be members of the Republican Party as it is today? Would they join MAGA? And there are people saying Lincoln would not and TR would not, and, you know, all these different people.
Oh, no, exactly. And I see here, Sean, Heather regularly says that the Republican Party is no longer conservative in any way. It isn't. It's full of radical extremists trying to tear down the government. Since as it's existed since FDR. So yeah, no, they are not definitely radical. They are definitely not conservative. And whatever they are, it's not really the Republican Party as it exists in a democratic system of government.
Yeah. All right. So Troy, my good buddy and fellow Springsteen fan, has he says Trumpism won't be purged until it's shown to be so unpopular that it's left outside the halls of power. So his question is, might we agree when facts are denied, the only recourse is to ensure that voting is free and fair and effectively force change among the anti-democratic side by showing them that they will be left out of power if they don't follow the rules?
Well, certainly one would hope that, but again, you know, one would hope this means that there's a press that isn't just both sidesing, right? A both sidesing press is just they think this and they think this, and hey, here you go. That question is premised more on, actually read the wording of the question back to me.
Yeah, he's asking, might we all agree when facts are denied, our only recourse is to assure that voting is free and fair as possible and effectively force change among the anti-democratic and unreasonable side by showing them that they will be left out of power.
That to me feels as though it's premised on the fact that that side needs to be presented fairly openly to the American people so that they know what they're voting for. Right? So if they win, then everybody else gets shut out. And if they lose, then we get democracy, right? If it's a contest between democracy and not so much democracy, make that clear. Let people vote on that. Don't pretend that this is a different kind of contest, because it isn't. Not at this point.
Yeah.
And you know, what's slightly terrifying is that if you said democracy versus not democracy vote, we don't know what the outcome would be. I think democracy would win. I also think a lot of people don't know what democracy is. And there's so much emotion here that there are going to be people voting according to emotion and not so much according to facts. But, you know, the press isn't really saying democracy versus not democracy. They're stuck in both sides land. And in both sides land, we're all democratic, small d, together. We're not in that zone.
Yeah. Troy's follow-up was with the Ronna McDaniel removal so abruptly that the media needs to also be shown that outlets that are not professional will lose viewers.
Well, I do want to say a positive thing about this. So Ronna McDaniel is hired. And obviously the fact that all of these major news hosts stood up and said, you know, some version of, she's not coming on my show, I protest this, this is unthinkable, was wonderful. The other thing that was wonderful was the number of people generally, the public, outrage at this, right? Like I know I've said this 100 million zillion times in the course of the 209 episodes. Okay, that's mathematically not possible, but follow along with me here. That in our form of government, public opinion matters. And if the public gets together in large numbers and voices what it thinks, that can have an impact. It really can. I don't think the public alone swayed NBC's decision, but I sure think it helped that when she was hired, it was not invisible. The public didn't just kind of and keep on. People responded. What the heck is this? Are you kidding me? That was important. That was important. And so I really do think it matters when we speak up. It matters that we notice what's going on and voice our opinions loudly and together. It matters because if there is something that a lot of people are outraged at, and you're talking about something that relies on viewership and numbers, or that relies on purchases of products, that can have an impact. In this case, as I said before, I don't think that we, the public, decided what happened to Ronna McDaniel, but we sure as heck helped. And then the hosts really swayed things. But, you know, whatever was happening there, and this is why I said at the outset, I wasn't going to get into the ins and outs, because in my digging around to put together what I wanted to say this morning, the ins and outs behind the scenes about who supported what and why and what might have happened to this person or that person, I can't even sort all that out. I'm sure it will be at some point. But just speaking of the general idea, that's what I'm talking about. Man, the chat is like, woo.
I know, the chat's going crazy, and now the Q&A is filling up. Okay, so Deb asks, somehow she connects your discussion with the extreme reluctance of the media to use the word lie. Using that word seems to be the first step for the media to properly cope with the current situation. So she's wondering, why are they not using that word lie enough?
That is something that I've been thinking about for years. Because as long as Trump's around, it's been an issue. And I say this as a historian of the late 18th and early 19th centuries, because in that era, lie and coward were the two absolute worst things you could say about anybody. Lie was a big, big deal. And the reason why it was a big, big deal, so coward means, you know, you're not manly, and that's a big deal. Lie, if you're a liar, it destroys your reputation. You cannot be trusted. You are a person who cannot be dealt with in any way because you are trustworthy. It has to be, just as in coward, you call the coward, you refute that by engaging in the duel and proving you're willing to die for your reputation. Same thing, if you're called a liar, in a sense, you have to step forward and put yourself in a sort of straightforward, death-defying situation to prove that you are so not worthy of that you're willing to die to disprove it. So lie or liar, that's a really serious accusation. And it also, there's not two sides, right? Lie and truth. Who was it who had truthiness? Was that Stephen Colbert who came
Oh
up
yeah,
with
truth and truthiness. Yeah, yeah.
truth and truthiness, right? So pretty much they're facts and lies, right? False truths or true facts, or I don't know. There's all kinds of attempts to create a middle ground. But I think lie, in a sense, doesn't allow for much middle ground and suggests intention. And both of those things, before you do that in the press, you want to be sure of them. So it's much easier to say any other number. You can all come up in chat, I'm sure, with the words that people use, untruths, questionable, whatever. But I see that now there's people saying that now lie is being used a lot. And that could very well be the case. There was a long period of time when it wasn't used at all. And I was very sensitive to that because I've written a lot about people using that word and why it's so serious. This would be interesting. And I bet someone could do, Tim, an interesting search to find an article on whether lie has been used more often in media. One would hope it is. It's going to have to be used more in the coming months, for sure.
Yeah, and Tim announced in the chat that he's retiring in October, so he has a lot more time coming up.
Oh.
We've already told him he has to start leading a book club on
Whoa.
History Matters Slack channel. He can be Linkmeister full-time instead of part-time.
Wow.
Yeah, Tim thinks he's going to have all this free time, but we're just going to keep putting him to work. Okay, let's see. Dale asks,
I do want to say one thing. That yes, someone I'm not following it here, but truthiness is not about middle ground, and I don't mean to say it is. Truthiness is just about that it's suggesting that there is something when there is nothing. Yep.
all right, Dale asks, was the media in the founding period all that different than the media today, considering the challenges they faced given the political disagreements in that time?
Well, here's the thing. An objective press wasn't the goal in the founding period, right? It's much later in time that you get the ideal of having an objective press. For a very long period of time, you get really wildly partisan presses. Many of them would post stories on both sides, or essays on both sides of an issue, although they would clearly be taking a side for one and against one. But in the founding period, newspapers were full of craziness in addition to some truths, and everybody knew that. But that's the important part, right? People didn't open the newspaper and think, here's the objective truth. They thought, okay, here's what's going to be presented today. And because some newspapers printed both sides, Federalist and Republican views of something, even if they were liking one more than another, if both sides were there, people could actually see them. So, there's something that doesn't happen so much anymore, but did happen in the founding period. But if the question is, was the press in the founding period wildly partisan, full of things that were like suggested but not necessarily true? Yeah, and there are all kinds of reasons why people like Thomas Jefferson, was like, I don't read newspapers, which is not entirely true, but still, they're all full of lies, right? That from the beginning was true and was a problem, right? On the one hand, newspapers are essential, that Europeans thought that the United States was the most newspapered nation that they had ever seen. Americans were wild about newspapers to figure out what was going on, again, given the vast geographical distance. So newspapers are important, but they're not necessarily objective truth. So they're really, really useful political tools. I want to see if I can find, I actually, when I first started looking up things today to talk about, I found a Benjamin Franklin quote, which didn't quite okay. So I found a Benjamin Franklin essay, I believe from the 1730s, that when clearly he was being attacked as a printer. That why is he publishing lies? Like, why is he? So he you should find it in Founders Online. Um, I'll read the quote I have here from it, so that if you look for something written by Franklin, and for example, you search on um, men differ in opinion or question in dispute, you will find it. There are just a list of facts that people assume about printers and what printers actually do. So number 5 was printers are educated in the belief that when men differ in opinion, both sides ought equally to have the advantage of being heard by the public, and that when truth and error have fair play, the former is always an overmatch for the latter. Hence, they cheerfully serve all contending writers that pay them well, without regard on which side they are of the question in dispute. Right? It's like truths, lies, whatever. We'll put them all out there, and people can judge. Number 1 reason here, he said there are so many people and so many views, we can like just record them all. And he said, so many men, so many minds, which I didn't write down, but I remember because how could you not? Anyway, so he's saying, talking about not even, there isn't even in America at that point, but oh, there we go, Tim. Apology for Printers, June 10th, 1731. That is precisely it. I'm going to put, someone pays me, I'm putting the news in the paper. I believe the truth will out. Here you go. That was a different era of the press, the media. Again, there's. Let's see if I can find the name. I'll try and find the name of it in the after party if folks stick around. There's a book that really interestingly covers, or several of them, the rise of objectivity in the press. But there's one in particular that did it in a really accessible kind of way, and I'll find the title. It's lurking back there, and I just can't fully turn around to find it without being rude. It's like on that shelf. Anyway, yeah. I'll find it later.
All right. And James has an interesting question. He says, Karl Popper discussed the paradox of tolerance. Herbert Marcuse wrote about the danger of repressive tolerance. John Rawls made the distinction that once somebody's views impact another's, we have a right to push back and express intolerance. He wants to know if you have any favorite thinkers on this topic.
Oh, on this topic of middle groundness, or
right,
both
right,
sides,
and tolerance versus people's rights when they're intolerant. Do you have a favorite writer? He lists a couple of his, but he's curious, like, who are your writers or thinkers on that?
I don't know if I have favorite writers or thinkers, but the thing that pops into my head as far as tolerance or lack of tolerance is Elie Wiesel, whose writings sometimes explicitly and sometimes don't. He was put in a concentration camp with his family. He wrote Night and Dawn. Night, I remember, had a huge impact on me as a kid. And his works, in one way or another, wrestle with tolerance and a lack of tolerance, and in his case, the Nazis. So it's not the same thing as my being able to spout a quote, but when I was young, he really had me thinking a lot about this question, tolerance and a lack of tolerance, and where you draw a line, and that sometimes you have to.
Yeah. All right. Kevin is wondering, are we doomed to allow anti-democratic forces to use our democracy to gain power? Are we undemocratic if we prevent anti-democratic forces to use our elections?
Well, that's the bind, right? Is that if we are following democratic rules, we have an open, free, and fair election, and something gets selected. Now, or someone, or some side, or some view. Now, the problem, of course, is if there's a side that isn't really committed to free and fair elections and is willing to do whatever they need to do to mess with the process so that they win, right? If there's a side that believes it should not ever lose, then it's a problem, right? Because then you're not having free and fair elections. This is where we are, right? Is that as small d democratic people, we want a contest. We want open, free, fair elections. We want people to choose what they want. What do you do when one side doesn't believe in that process? Or when one side is certainly really willing to throw it over to get what they want? That's why I'm saying there's no middle ground. There's no both sides. It's someone who says, yeah, public opinion matters, free and fair elections, vote for what you want. And one side that says, yeah, well, whatever. We don't really care. we're going to do things so that we never lose. I don't have a solution for that. That's in a sense what I've been talking about this morning. Playing by one set of rules and playing by another set of rules. Hard to find, a middle ground. If you want to talk about both sides, be truthful about what both sides present. You don't have to use words like evil. Just be truthful about what each side presents. This side believes an election lie that was disproven. This side, whatever, there needs to be, I hate to smack at the press because the press is so important, but there needs to be really clear-eyed coverage of what's going on now, without such absolute, seemingly well-meaning, ideologically good commitment to both sides. We need to be showing sides and what those sides are. Both somehow suggest that they're in the same universe. And right now, I don't think that's the case.
Yeah. So Miriam has an interesting question. She said that she's heard that some of the members of the Republican Party are just going along with whatever Trump says because they fear for their personal safety. Like when they put a noose in a, hang Mike Pence kind of a way. And, she's wondering why that's not being highlighted. Like, are these people just going along with whatever he says because they are worried that the MAGA, as violent as they were like on January 6th, are they going to come after anyone who dares cross him or disagree with him publicly? So are they literally just doing it for their own personal safety?
Oh, I'm sure there are some who are doing it. And thus you see how authoritarians rise, right? Thus you see the power of bullying, of threats, of violence. You only have to do that a little, right? This is what I talk about in my book about violence in Congress. You only have to make people in Congress willing to believe that violence might erupt at any time to intimidate them. So if a few fights, a few Bowie knives or guns pulled on the floor, and people who oppose slavery or people who are against the South about one thing or another, they're going to think twice before standing up and saying something. You don't have to display that violence every time. You have to make it clear that it is a threat. It's the threat that has the power. And that's precisely in some way where we are. So yeah, it makes perfect sense that there are some people who are either going to try and be quiet or who are going to try and go along because they're afraid of what might happen. And we see all the time, people are very willing to step up and threaten people who do things that the MAGA people don't like. So yeah, that is how you get the rise of authoritarianism. That is how you get the rise of dictators, by people threatening the lives and well-being and homes and everything else of people who disagree with them. And if that is a system, if that is a thing that is predictable and widespread, that is a alarm bell of anti-democratic commitments, right? Those are people who say we don't like when we lose, so we're going to threaten to hurt you if you do anything to help defeat us in one way or another. That's how democracy works, right? It's ridiculous for me to have to say that in a democracy sometimes you lose. You do, right? That's how it works. And sometimes The people who win are people who you really, really, for all kinds of reasons, don't want to win. But if they're playing by the same rules, then you could throw them out, right? Then at least you're in a system where people have some control. But generally speaking, if you're trying to make it so that you can never lose, you are by definition anti-democratic.
All right. So a couple people in the chat today, and Dave here in the Q&A, were wondering if you could talk a little more about Carrie Lake's defamation case. She continues to make public statements saying she did nothing wrong, lying in public, but then she had to admit for legal reasons to get herself out of trouble that she did lie. So he's just wondering.
I'm not up on those details enough to say something that will be helpful to people here. I would bet that we could all sit here and come up with lots of examples of people who, are caught up in lies they told versus where they want to be now. I mean, obviously, Ronna McDaniel, who hasn't even denied the lies she told, but all kinds of people. If you're on the Trump team and you're spreading those lies, and then you want to speak on another platform by another set of rules, that's a problem. I'm lying, I'm committed to the lies. Hey, bring me in and have me be a commentator. That's a problem, right? It's a problem.
I think wasn't one of Steve Bannon's judgments against him for something similar, and the E. Jean Carroll, the second one, after he defamed her after he lost the first case. Isn't that what the second one, he had to pay even more because he.
Well, right, because he keeps on doing
Yeah.
what he's doing, right? And because he thinks he's entitled to, he has the right to, and he'll just keep doing it until someone in some way holds him accountable. And that's its own separate problem. I'm trying to follow along because the chat is going so fast. And every
No,
once in
it
a while
does.
I look over and I'm like, this is a good point.
Yep. So a lot of people have put this in the chat, but Kevin asked it in the Q&A. You were talking about the newspapers earlier and that they weren't really supposed to be unbiased in the beginning. Someone mentioned in the chat, it's mostly white men who are reading newspapers. So Kevin's wondering about the degree of, was there a high literacy rate in the founding period? Like who really could read a newspaper and how did that kind of shape elections?
Well, so a couple ways to answer that. First of all, there was, in comparison with Europe, there was a high literacy rate in the United States, but that differed regionally. So particularly in New England, where you needed to be able to read the Bible, higher literacy. In the South, lower literacy. And I remember my most frequent fighter, Henry Wise, from Virginia, in his later years, has this big campaign to promote education and learning reading in the South because he's mortified at the number of Virginians who just actually can't read. But as far as the question goes about did that shape elections, it's also important to realize that newspapers were read aloud sometimes or discussed like at taverns or coffee houses. There weren't mass numbers of newspapers because the technology wasn't there for that, right? So a newspaper like the National Gazette or the Gazette of the United States, maybe there were 2,500 issues printed. They were passed from person to person. They were talked about. They were read aloud in public spots. So you didn't necessarily even need to read to be exposed to that. But that said, there also was pretty high literacy, generally speaking, in early America.
So Kathleen points out that in Michigan, a representative claimed on social media that he had photographic evidence of illegals invading the Detroit Metro Airport, but it turned out to be the NCAA men's basketball team coming to play in the NCAA. So she's wondering, is there any other time in history when truth mattered less than now?
Oh, wow. But I wouldn't say truth matters less now. I would say technology is helping to challenge it in new ways. I'm always, someone has said at some point in the past, if you're talking about technology and democracy, I'm like, that's really fundamentally fascinating to me. And we're in a moment in which, once again, in ways that we haven't even fully fathomed yet, technology is going to be affecting us. And how lucky for us that that's happening in the midst of a really, really important election.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we wouldn't have known about George Floyd if someone hadn't filmed it and shown it live on television, from their phone.
Well, this is the thing, is the people with phones who are able to film things is pretty major. I've already talked more than once, I know, about the gun control protest in, I believe it was the House, and they turned off the cameras. So the members of Congress who were there pulled out their phones to spread what was happening to the nation. And I stayed up and watched that until whatever 0 o'clock in the morning it went, because it was like, and there you go. There's technology being used to spread information in a new way. It hasn't happened before. That's fascinating. But yeah, the fact that we're in this moment that we are with new technologies, that we don't even fully understand how they can be used yet, that's daunting. And that is another way in which we now have to quadruple think before we believe what we see. I guess it's already 5 minutes after. So
yeah,
I guess we should.
Yep.
And actually, Lori, yeah, why the destruction of Twitter was additionally significant. When Twitter wasn't yet a sort of cesspool, I remember on the one hand being amazed at the degree to which it was a collecting ground for people to be able to meet and argue, but also organize,
Yep.
right? And that it served an important purpose. And that there were many times in which I went there and found out about something almost before the press could catch up with it. And if I went to reliable sources, it was amazing, or people joining together and organizing on Twitter. It was an amazing, could have been and was it for some an amazing democratic small d tool. And I thought way back then, if this goes away, I bet you could find it if you go to Twitter and search on me. And I would almost guess I probably at some point would have used the phrase uninfluential atoms, which is what someone said, a Burrite said, like, we don't have a newspaper. We support Burr, but we don't have a newspaper. It will make us uninfluential atoms. That the absence of Twitter would be a real gap in democracy, because it would, that sort of meeting place would vanish. And sure enough, I think that's true. And there is not another meeting place of its kind. There are many, but not one central one, and sure would have been interesting and useful to have one now.
And Uninfluential Atoms is definitely a great band name. And that's how I will end the Q&A for today.
Okay. Let me explain what's going to happen next. Oops, let me move this and let me do this. Okay, so what's going to happen next is we're going to go to the after party. What that means is that we will stop recording so that we can be even freer and easier in our discussion and talk about whatever we want to talk about. And we can explain Zabo Avocado for those who want an explanation. If you are watching us on Facebook, you need to leave Facebook to go to the after party. You need to go to ncheteach.org/conversations. That's ncheteach.org/conversations. And then you will, poof, be in the after party. For those who are already here, you don't have to do anything. And poof, you will be in the after party. And we will then talk about whatever we want to talk about then. I do want to thank everyone, first of all, everyone who came here for this discussion. I like, increasingly, sometimes it's hard for me to think of a topic, not for lack of topics, but because I'm like, I can talk about this. I'm like, there's a lot to talk about, and it's important for us to be here and talk about it, and not just to air our ideas, but when in airing them together, kind of along the lines of what I just said about Twitter, we come to new realizations just by having this kind of exchange. So again, at this particular moment, what we do here is important, and thank you to everybody who keeps coming. Thank you to Annie and Claire Zabo Avocado and John and Jessica for making this possible and being here. This would not exist without you guys, and I am grateful for that. I wish everyone a good week. For those who celebrate, a happy Easter. I think this Sunday is Easter, right? If it is, it is. Okay, so I wish everyone who celebrates a happy Easter. And I will be back in a week with some new news items sparking me to to rant. In the meantime, everyone be safe and be healthy and happy, and I will see you soon. Okay.